Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art-of-photography.
Hey everybody, welcome back once again to The Art of Photography. My name is Ted Forbes, and today I've got a special treat for you. We are going to be taking a look at the work of Richard Avedon. Now, Richard Avedon, and this is actually a book that was published after he died a few years ago, but if you're not familiar with him, American photographer, fabulous talent, was one of the early pioneers of commercial fashion photography, primarily in the 60s, 70s, up through 90s, and so forth. Extremely talented individual, and he kind of had feet both in the commercial world and the fine art world, so he really had a lot of respect on both sides of that. Did a lot of celebrity work, a lot of fashion work, and then in the fine art world was commissioned, in the early 90s, I believe, by the Amon Carter Museum in Fort Worth to do a series called The American West, which you've probably seen a lot of pictures of. But really my favorite period of Richard Avedon's work was his early stuff in the 60s, and that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today, actually the 50s and 60s, and specifically the fashion industry. And so let's have a look and see what he's all about. Okay, so the book we're looking at today is a book that came out just a few years ago. This is called Woman in the Mirror. It was actually published after Richard Avedon's death. And really, this is one of my favorites. I really love a lot of Avedon's work, but particularly what I find the most interesting are the fashion photography stuff that he did early on, even up through kind of some of the 70s, but mainly this focus of early stuff. And I'm going to give a little bit of historical perspective here as well. This is Dorian Lee, who was a model, and it says with bicycle racer. This was on the Champs-Élysées in Paris from 1949. And what you have to understand, and I don't have anything to really compare this with that I can show you here, but a lot of the way fashion photography was done early on, and it still is today for a large part, are kind of, the models are emotionless, they're staring at the camera, there's this kind of weird quality to a lot of it. And Avedon came along and actually changed that. A lot of his shots were focused with extreme emotion, with this woman hugging the bike racer, and she's smiling. There's a sense of emotion there, of happiness, of joy. And this was really much a divorce from a lot of these early fashion style of photography that was going on at the time. Again, these are just absolutely wonderful. These are from the 50s. But this was a shot that was done with a circus. And what's really cool about this was probably done on an 8x10 camera. Well, it was, because you can see the frame on here. But you have this real extreme depth of field where the woman, the clown, and the guy with the monkey are in focus, but out of focus back here are these elephants. And there's a real surreal quality with that large scale depth of field like that that really creates an interesting photo. Not only that, but I think it's also important to understand that this photo works with this dress because it is white, it's very stark, and there's no detail in it, things like that. So she really stands out in terms of what's going on here. But the playfulness of these circus photos, this is another classic Avedon shot, again from the 50s. There's one with the elephants, the dress, but what's most important here is Avedon, and I don't know whether or not this was intentional with the way he shot, it probably was, but the sense of line that you have, following her leg and her foot with the sash on this dress, all the way to her left arm, which extends out this way to her right arm, which continues with the elephant trunk, the pose that's fallen back with the head tilted to the back. Again, with the depth of field, you have areas that are slightly out of focus. It almost gives these kind of a throwback vintage quality to them, but with this modern kind of almost surreal element of having elephants in a composition in a fashion shoot, which is extremely interesting. This is the shot from the cover. One thing I really love about this, again, is this sense of not afraid to be loose with things. You see the backdrop in the photo, you see the lighting up here, the window light from the top, and the model down here kind of with this sense of wonder on her face, extremely well lit. It would have been a beautiful shot had this been cropped in, but I love the fact that he wasn't afraid to leave it open like that too. Avedon shot a lot of these with an 8x10 view camera, so the cropping is available with such a high level of detail. Again, with this model, much like the woman with the elephants we saw a minute ago, you see such a beautiful form in this composition. It's a square composition, probably taken with a Rolleiflex. This is from '58, but the symmetry of the hair with this larger part up on the top, this Princess Leia type hairdo, but you have, again, this extension through the arms, this use of line, the way it fills the space. And also important here is the negative space around this. It's cropped just right. It really creates a sense of drama, a sense of interest. It's a very compelling composition. These are very classic in nature. Again, remember models being shot with emotionless faces. Well, you know, if you're shooting this for I don't know who this was shot for, but let's say Vogue, something like that. You know, how do you create an interest, especially with a rather dark dress? Well, the way it spins, she's probably turning, and the fact that you have these three guys walking by that are giving her the eye, so to speak. But really, again, wonderful compositions from 1947, so fairly early. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. This was probably done in the 70s, but again, just such a wonderful composition with this model's hair and the way that it just fills the frame. A tough shot to do. You can tell she was moving. You do have a little bit of motion blur in there, but it's not perfect, and that motion blur, even in her face, it's okay to suggest things are moving from time to time, but the composition here clearly is what's going on with the wild hairdo. Okay, so that has been Richard Avedon. This is a book called Woman in the Mirror, which is a must-own, I believe, and I will put a link to this book in the show notes. If you want to access the show notes and see what other podcasts we do, you can go to thepublicbroadcast.com, and don't forget to follow us on the Twitter. My handle is @TedForbes, or if you just want to get show notes and updates and things like that, you can follow @AOP_podcast. And once again, this has been The Art of Photography, and thank you for watching.